Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Maulana Shabbir is on his way, he's running late, traffic and so on. So inshallah ta'ala, till he comes, we'll have a few nights looking around to see who can read after him, inshallah. Allah fill the culture then. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulallah wa sallam alayka ya Habib Allah. کیا مہکتے ہیں مہکنے والے، کیا مہکتے ہیں مہکنے والے، بو پہ چلتے ہیں بھٹکنے والے، بو پہ چلتے ہیں بھٹکنے والے، جگمگا اٹھی میری گور کی خاک، جگمگا اٹھی میری گور کی خاک، تیرے قربان چمکنے والے، تیرے قربان چمکنے والے، وہی دھوم ان کی ہے ماشاء اللہ، وہی دھوم ان کی ہے ماشاء اللہ، مٹ گئے آپ مٹانے والے، مٹ گئے آپ مٹانے والے، سنیو ان سے مدد مانگے جاؤ، سنیو ان سے مدد مانگے جاؤ، پڑے بکتے رہے بکنے والے، پڑے بکتے رہے بکنے والے، عاصیو تھام لو دامن ان کا، عاصیو تھام لو دامن ان کا، وہ نہیں ہاتھ جھٹکنے والے، وہ نہیں ہاتھ جھٹکنے والے، حسن تیرا سا نہ دیکھا نہ سنا، حسن تیرا سا نہ دیکھا نہ سنا، کہتے ہیں اگلے زمانے والے، کہتے ہیں اگلے زمانے والے، مہ بے داغ کے صدقے جاؤں، مہ بے داغ کے صدقے جاؤں، یوں دمکتے ہیں دمکنے والے، یوں دمکتے ہیں دمکنے والے، گل طیبہ کی ثنا گاتے ہیں، گل طیبہ کی ثنا گاتے ہیں، نخل طوبیٰ پہ چہکنے والے، نخل طوبیٰ پہ چہکنے والے، عرش تک پھیلی ہے تاب عارض، عرش تک پھیلی ہے تاب عارض، یوں جھلکتے ہیں جھلکنے والے، یوں جھلکتے ہیں جھلکنے والے، کوئی ان تیز رموں سے کہہ थकने वाले, किसके होकर रहे थकने वाले। क्यों रज़ा आज गली सोनी है, क्यों रज़ा आज गली सोनी है। उठ मेरे धूम मचाने वाले, उठ मेरे धूम मचाने वाले। कफ़े दरियाए करम में है रज़ा, कफ़े दरिया ए करम में है रज़ा। पाँच फव्वारे छलकने वाले।
नहमदुहु व नसल्ली व नसल्लिमु अला रसूलिल करीम। अम्मा बाद फ़अऊज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम। बिस्मिल्लाहिर रहमानिर रहीम। الذين يتبعون الرسول النبي الأمي الذي يجدونه مكتوبا عندهم في التوراة والإنجيل. صدق الله العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وأصحاب سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رحمة للعالمين وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا شفيع المذنبين. Apologies for the slight delay, and I'm going to continue pretty much where I left off last time. We completed the narration regarding Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala and about his encounter in Syria, in Sham, and how he was recognized, and not only that he was recognized, but the priest, the monk who recognized him, actually took a written statement from him that when he would become leader of those lands, he would not demolish his monastery, which he later reminded Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu of when he actually visited the land of Sham during his Khilafah. The next thing is another narration of a similar nature, which Imam Nabhani rahimahullah ta'ala, he narrates in this section regarding the bisharat and glad tidings that were given of the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He narrates a hadith regarding, or a narration regarding Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, and this is narrated by Sayyidina Abdullah bin Masud radiallahu ta'ala. And as well as Imam Nabhani narrating this hadith here, another reference for this hadith which I mentioned last time is Ustul Ghaba, the famous work on biographies of Sahaba and biographies of narrators. And this can be found in that very famous text as well. The narration is that Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he went to Yemen for business, and while he was there, he bumped into an elderly scholar in Yemen, and this person looked at him, he watched him very carefully, and then he asked him question. He said, "Are you from Makkah? Are you from the land of the Haram? Ahiliyun anta?" And he replied affirmative. He said, "Yes, Naam." And depending on different narrations, one of the narrations is that the old man then asked Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, "Are you from the Quraysh of قرشي أنت? And he replied affirmatively, and then he asked him, are you from Banu Taym? And he replied affirmatively again. This narration which Imam Nabhani rahimahullah ta'ala narrates here, in this it only mentions that he asked Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, and he asked him, are you from Makkah, are you from the Haram? And he says yes. And then he explained to him that I am from Banu Taym bin Murrah, and he explained his lineage and who he was to him. And the old man then said to him, he said, Ikshif li an batanik. He said, expose your stomach to me, I want to see your stomach. And Irfa qamisak, lift up your shirt, let me see your stomach. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he stopped for a moment. He asked him, he said, tell me, he said, Qultu la afal. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to raise my shirt, I'm not going to show you my stomach until you tell me why. Until you tell me why you want me to do this, I'm not going to show it to you. And he then responded to him and he said, Inni ajidu fil ilm as-sahih as-sadiq, that I have found in trusted, sound, reliable knowledge, anna an-nabiyya yub'athu fil haram, that the Prophet is about to be sent to Makkah, to the land of the Haram. يُعَاوِنُهُ عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِ فَتًى وَكَهْلٌ. He said that a young man and a middle-aged man, both are going to be his helpers in his affair, in his matter, which is obviously propagation of the deen. And so, when he says, قَدْ وَجَدْتُ فِي عِلْمِ السَّحِيحِ, then what he was talking about there was the biblical scriptures that he'd studied. And it was clear that within them, he had found these descriptions of these two individuals that were specifically mentioned there as helpers of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. And although it doesn't specify in terms of the word fatan means young man, I think if you look at it right from the outset, those who helped, then this perhaps is more indicative towards Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala. But also Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala, when he accepted Islam, was also a young man. So there's a possibility that this is talking about the Shaykhain, he's talking about Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq and Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu ta'ala. So he mentioned to him, he said, I found in those books, and I found a description of both of them. And he described to him both of those individuals. And he said, فَأَمَّا الْقَهْلِ, the one who's in his middle age, that person, فَأَبْيَضْ نَحِيفٌ عَلَى بَطَنِهِ شَامًا, said that he's someone with a fair complexion, slender build, and someone with a mark, a distinguishing mark, a beauty spot or a distinguishing mark on his stomach. And also, he mentioned, وَعَلَى فَخِذِهِ الْيُسْرَى, in that detail, right, that on his left thigh, there is also a distinguishing mark. On his stomach and on his left thigh. وَعَلَى فَخِذِهِ الْيُسْرَى عَلَامًا. And he said, divine law and common decency prevents me from asking you to show me this mark that is on your thigh. Because that's your aura, and I can't ask you to expose your aura to me. But this mark on your stomach, there's nothing preventing me from seeing that. So that's why I want you to show me this mark. And so Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he says that فَكَشَفْتُ لَهُ عَنْ بَطَنِي. He says, I exposed my stomach to him, I showed him my stomach. And he saw a black mark on my stomach. فوق صدرتي, just above my navel. And he said, قال أنت هو ورب الكعبة. I swear by the Lord of the Kaaba, you are that person. You are the one. He recognized Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. And then Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he went away, did his business. And as the narration goes, he came back, and on the way back, he said, he spoke to this old man again. Or the old man himself, he met with Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala before he left. And he said to him, I want you to do something for me. Or he asked him, is there anything that I can do for you? And this old sheikh, this scholar, he gave him he recited to him. In this narration it mentions that he recited to him, and then it would have been that Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he memorized the verses and couplets that he recited, or that he gave him in writing some couplets in praise of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala. He gave him a nod of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to take with him. And he said, when you get back to Makkah, then give this poem of mine, present it to the last and final messenger, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala. So, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he says that I returned. And when I came back, during that time, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had announced that he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he received revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Abu Jahl and party had heard this news. And at that instant, instead of directly rebutting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or directly refuting the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they decided to wait. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he was considered, even prior to accepting Islam, he was considered amongst the nobility and also the intellectual elite of Makkah al-Mukarramah. And for this reason, he would govern and judge over some of their most difficult cases. And so they said, let's wait for Abu Bakr. He's a close friend, he's a very intelligent man. Let's wait for him, let's see what he has to say. And as Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala approached Makkah al-Mukarramah, these people were waiting. They were waiting on the side of Makkah al-Mukarramah where they were anticipating him to arrive from. And as soon as he arrived, it mentions in a very leading manner, Abu Jahl said to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he said, oh Abu Bakr, he said, do you know that the orphan of Abu Talib, he thinks that he's a prophet. Yatimu Abi Talib yaz'umu annahu nabi. Now this is a very particular manner of actually speaking to him and presenting it before him. In that it's a leading statement that he was trying to imply that this is not possible. How is it possible for this person who's an orphan, to be chosen as a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from amongst us? Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, it mentions Abu Jahl and Abu al-Bastari, Uqba bin Abi Mu'eed, and others who were there with him as well. They said, what do you think about this? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he said, I can't tell you like this, let me speak to him first. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he called out to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to see him. And he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, this is what I've been told. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded, and he said, Ya Abu Bakr, inni Rasulullahi ilayka wa ila nasi jamia. He said, Abu Bakr, I have been sent as a prophet, as a messenger to you and to all of humanity. And if we just pause there for a moment, we can see the status of Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala becoming evident right from the outset, right from the advent of Islam, from the advent and beginning of this declaration and this propagation, that the Prophet ﷺ could have simply just said that Inni Rasulullahi ila nasi Jamia, and that would include Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. If he had said that I am being sent as a messenger to all of humanity, that includes Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala. But just look at the phrase, Inni Rasulullahi ilayka wa ila nasi Jamia. I've been sent as a messenger to you and all of humanity. Showing and expressing that bond right from there. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he then asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, do you have any evidence to support this claim? Any proof? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, so he asked him, وَمَا آيَتُكَ? Or وَمَا دَلِيلُكَ? What's your evidence? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, قَالَ الشَّيْخُ الَّذِي لَقِيتَهُ بِالْيَمَنِ. The old man, the scholar that you met in Yemen. And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he says, فَقُلْتُ, I said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَكَمْ مِنْ شَيْخٍ قَدْ لَقِيتُ بِالْيَمَنِ. So I met so many shuyukh in Yemen. And Yemen was known as a land of knowledge, especially biblical knowledge at the time. So I met many shuyukh and many scholars, many old men. You know, that could have been a coincidental sort of statement from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just to eradicate any shadow of doubt, he said, I met many people, many elderly scholars in Yemen. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he replied and he said, الشيخ الذي أخبرك عني وأفادك الأبيات. He said, the Shaykh, الشيخ الذي أخبرك عني, the Shaykh who told you about me, وأفادك الأبيات, and he gave to you the poetry, the poem, the verses regarding me. I'm talking about that Shaykh. So the Prophet ﷺ told him clearly, الذي أخبرك عني وأفادك الأبيات, the one who told you about me and the one who gave you the poem, the naat that he'd written in praise of me. And so at that point, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, he says, I asked, قلت ومن أخبرك بهذا يا حبيبي. He said, my beloved, who's told you about this? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he replied, Al-Malikul Azim, or Al-Malakul Azim rather, the angel, the great angel, who الذي كان يأتي الأنبياء قبلي, the great angel who came to prophets before me as well, Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. He said, he's the one who Al-Malakul Azim الذي كان يأتي الأنبياء قبلي. He's the one who told me. فقلت أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأنك رسول الله. He said, I then said that I testify that there is no God besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that you are the messenger of Allah. And he testified to his Islam. When he came back, it's narrated that, and the narration that Imam Nabhani mentions, that's it, it concludes there. But the narration in Ustul Ghaba is a little longer, and other narrations, it mentions that Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he went back to Abu Jahl and those people. And this is also the answer if somebody asks that, is it not that Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala was the only person to accept Islam without asking any kind of evidence from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as the Prophet sallallahu himself mentions? And the correlation between the two is that the Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, why did he ask for that evidence? Because when he went back to see, he knew that Abu Jahl and company were waiting for him there. And that if he was going to go back to them that they would want some kind of proof or evidence for his judgment. So when he went back to them, he said to them, he said, I've accepted Islam. And I encourage you, I implore you to do the same. And they said, Abu Bakr, you're a very intelligent person. How could you leave, how could you sort of accept this new religion without any proof, any evidence? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he said to them that the one sitting right here in Mecca who can tell me all of my activities from Yemen, when he tells me that there's only one God, then I believe it. So Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, this is a demonstration not only of the miracle of this bashara and glad tiding of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, but also you see from here, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala described in such detail in those texts that he was recognized by those scholars. And then when he returned, it also demonstrates the knowledge of the hidden, of the unseen, ilm al-ghaib of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is practically informing him of everything that he did during his trip in Yemen. And that becomes the basis of the evidence that Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala then presents before Abu Jahl and the others. Now, moving on, so you've seen how the physical descriptions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his inner characteristics, his companions were described in so much detail. And I mentioned to you that even the city of birth, and more so, the city of migration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, were described in great detail in these previous books and scriptures that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent. And some of that we mentioned last time, looking at the mass migration of the Jews from Al-Quds, from Sham into Medina Munawwara. And also, I want to mention to you here a couple of narrations. The first one I'm going to skim through briefly, and that's Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu ta'ala, and how he started off in Isfahan and in Persia. His father, and Imam Nabhani rahimahullah ta'ala, in this section he mentions in detail that narration as well. But it's very famous, it's something that Sayyidina Salman al-Farsi radiallahu ta'ala actually narrated himself, and he told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba his own story on his own tongue. He says that my father was a very wealthy person in Isfahan, in Iran, in Persia, and he had a lot of land, and they worshipped fire. And he says that his father, he was very, very beloved to his father, perhaps an only child, and very beloved to his father, to the extent that he kept him very much sheltered within his home, didn't allow him to leave the home much, until eventually he came of age, and his father one day was busy with other things, and he sent him out. He said, go out to our lands and keep an eye on the people that are working on our land. And he says, I left my home, and on my way there, I'd only traveled a short distance from my home, and I came across a Christian monastery. And I peered in there, and I saw people worshipping. And I was quite intrigued by how they were worshipping. Their manner of worshipping was quite intriguing. And so I went in, I sat down, I spoke to those people, and I was quite intrigued by their religion. And I sat there all day just listening to them about their religion, learning from them about their religion. And he stayed there all day, much longer than he was supposed to. Meanwhile, his father at home, getting restless, is not coming back home, and sending out people to look for him. Eventually, when he returned home, his father asked, and he told him. He said that I got sidetracked, I went into this monastery. He explained the whole incident to him. And his father became worried, because he questioned him about his religion. And Sayyidina Salman al-Farsi radiallahu ta'ala, he said to his father very clearly, he said, I find their way of worship very interesting, very appealing. I find their religion very appealing. And fearing that he would lose his religion, and ultimately then fearing that that may be the reason that he will ultimately lose his son, his father has him put in shackles and locked up in his own home. Somehow, Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, he manages to get a message to these people. And he'd asked them already where their sort of center was, and they'd said to him that their center at that time in terms of knowledge and their community was Sham. They said, if anybody's going that way, let me know. And so they managed to get a message to him that there's a caravan going on such and such a day if you wish to go with them. And he managed to free himself of those shackles and chains. And he joined this caravan. And he traveled a fair deal. He went first to Sham. And in that area he went and he asked the people, he said, who is your most learned scholar? And they pointed him towards a priest, and he went to his church, his monastery. He said to him, if you allow me to stay with you and serve you, I would like to learn from you in exchange for this service. And so he agreed. Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, he says that I found out quite quickly that this person, he wasn't a very good man. He was commanding people to give charity and sadaqah, and yet those people, when they were giving him that charity, he was holding it for himself. When he died, he says that there was loads of gold and silver and other things, which were, he basically left behind a whole stash of gold and silver and other things that people had donated for the religion. And then somebody else took his place. And he says that person was actually a very God-fearing person. And he learned a great deal from him about the Christian religion. And he says that he taught me a great deal. He was a very pious and God-fearing person. But eventually, he also reached the point of death. And so just before he died, realizing that he's going to die, I asked him, I said, where can I go now? And so he sent him to Mosul. And he went there, he stayed there, the same thing happened there. He lived with a priest for some time. And then he was about to die, and he asked him, and he guided him and said to him, go to Amorium. And he said, there's one priest there who I can think of who is still living in the same way that we're living in. And he went to see him. The same thing happened again, until eventually the priest, before he was about to die, when he asked him, he said, where shall I go now? He said to him, there isn't really anyone that I can guide you towards. There's no one now living the same way that I was and practicing the Christian religion and teachings the way that I was. I would advise you to go to the land of dates and go and wait for the last and final messenger, for his arrival is near. And he says, by this time, I'd accumulated some wealth. I'd bought some cattle, I'd been working, and I had a little bit of wealth, I'd bought some cattle. And I found a group from Banu Kalb who was heading towards Makkah. And I said to them, if you take me with you in your caravan, you can have all of my livestock and all of the wealth that I have. And so they agreed. They made this deal that we will take you to Makkah in exchange for your livestock and the wealth that you have. Now, in case you're wondering that, he went to at least 4 different priests that are mentioned in that narration, and he stayed with them until eventually they all died. There's nothing sinister about this, that everyone he went to eventually died. The likelihood is that these were the greatest scholars of their time, so the likelihood is they were old men anyway. But in some narrations, it actually mentions that Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, by the time he arrived and he met the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was actually over 300 years old. And so, this is such an amazing story from that perspective as well, that it seems like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously this honor is reserved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everyone. You can't become a Sahabi now. That honor was reserved for those people who had the fortune of being in the company of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and reserved for every one of them. But for somebody to live that long and go through all of this and then meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not just a coincidence. You know, it does seem that he had in a particular blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his favor that he was to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he arrives in Makkah then. But when he arrives in Makkah, these people, they take his wealth, they take his livestock, they tie him up and sell him in the streets of Makkah, claiming that he's their slave. Nobody to actually vouch for him, nobody knows him, he's in a foreign land, these people are natives to that land, you know, who's going to do anything about it? So, from coming from a background where he was the heir to a massive, you know, empire and wealth of his father, he becomes enslaved. And Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, he's purchased by a Jewish man from Medina Munawwara. He comes to Medina Munawwara, starts working on his plantation. And he narrates, he says that I was working one day. He says, when I arrived in Medina Munawwara, and I looked around me, my sorrows seemed to fade away. But even though I had become enslaved, and just imagine for a moment what it means to become a slave. You become someone else's property. You can't do anything without that person's permission. You can't own anything. Anything that you own belongs to your master. He basically lost he was living, but he lost his right to live and his life. And even in that difficult situation, he says that when I arrived in Medina Munawwara, I looked around me and my sorrows sort of drifted away. Because I realized straight away that this is the place where the last and final messenger is going to come. And he says that then I started to wait. The anticipation growing day by day. Until eventually he says one day I was working in the orchard on top of one of the trees. And my master's cousin, he came to him. And he said to him, do you know, somebody's just arrived in Quba. And he's claiming that he's the last and final messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, he says that, you know, this, the only way I can describe it is this current of, electric current of happiness and joy went through his body in such a way that he says, I almost fell off the tree that I was working in. And I hurried down to the ground. And I came to him, I went up to him and I said, just tell me what you said again, just explain to me. And this is where you see what, the sacrifices that he made. Because in some narrations it mentions that his master struck him across the face and he said, get back to work. What gives you the right to come and speak to us? He went back to work. But he started working and he said, I gathered some dates and I went to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I made time to go and visit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I took these dates with me and I said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I bring some sadaqah, I bring some charity. And he says the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had those dates distributed amongst the needy or amongst those who were sitting there, but he didn't eat himself. And then he says, I went again after a few days and I took some more dates. And I said this time to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that I brought a gift for you. This is a hadiyah, it's a gift. And he says the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam took it, he took some dates himself, and he then had the rest distributed amongst the others who were there. And he says this was the first sign. The first sign that I'd seen, that I had read, was that this last prophet and messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will receive gifts and hadiyah, but he will not partake in any kind of sadaqah, in charity and sadaqah. He won't eat that himself. And that I had witnessed for myself. The next thing he says is about the seal of prophethood. And this is the section of this narration that Imam Tirmidhi mentions in his Shama'il al-Ansar. that he says that I went one day, the Prophet ﷺ had returned from a janazah, a funeral, and I waited until everybody had dispersed. I started following the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, like many other occasions, not just this occasion, there's other Sahaba who narrate this as well, that they had come to see the Prophet ﷺ, they followed the Prophet ﷺ without looking behind. The Prophet ﷺ called out their name and said, is it so and so? Is this why you've come? And so on this occasion, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, without Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu ta'ala having to ask, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam removed his cloak, his upper garment, and exposed his back between his shoulder blades, the seal of Prophet. Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu ta'ala, he says, when I saw that, I leapt forward and I kissed it. And just imagine the happiness and the joy then. So the Prophet didn't need to be told who was following, didn't need to be told what he wanted to see and what he wanted. The Prophet ﷺ blessed him without him having to ask for it. ये दर है मेरे आका का यहाँ मिलता है बिन मांगे अरे नादां यहाँ दामन को फैलाया नहीं करते. The Prophet ﷺ bestows and blesses without people having to ask for it. All you need is a sincere heart. And even today, you go with a sincere heart, and you don't need to make a plea there. You will walk away with your wishes fulfilled, because the Prophet ﷺ is so generous. Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, I mentioned the rest of this narration previously as well, so I'm not going to go into that, how he was set free. We spoke about that, and in particular, the one date palm that was planted by Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And Imam Tirmidhi, that's the narration that he mentioned, that Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, when the Prophet asked, he said, what happened to that one tree? Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he stood up and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I planted it. And that's why it's not given fruit with the rest of the tree. Even Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu does not consider himself in any way equal to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. Now, that's Sayyidina Salman Farsi radiallahu ta'ala from a biblical perspective, from a Christian perspective rather, through the knowledge that he'd acquired through his travels and staying with all those Christian priests and studying their texts. He was able to recognize that land as soon as he arrived there. And in the same way, this land of Medina Munawwara, traditionally, this was an oasis. It was a spot for travelers to stop and rest and then move on. There was a water source here, and travelers, they came, they stopped here, and they moved on. There was no actual residence at the place that is now Madinatul Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. When did people actually start residing there? Imam Nabhani rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions that narration as well. It's beautiful. And when I came across this first time, I actually came across it in a text called Sharful Mustafa sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And this is actually authored by Imam Abu Sa'd, Abdul Malik bin Abu Uthman, Muhammad bin Ibrahim, and Nishapuri. And when I came across it, I try to, usually I'm of the habit of, if I come across a narration, I try to go back to the original source if I can. And so I searched for a while until I found the book Sharful Mustafa. And when I eventually located it, it was 6 volumes. And I thought I'm going to have to spend a bit of time searching for this narration. But coincidentally, I opened up the book, as you normally do. I picked up the first volume, I opened it up, looked at the first chapter, and the first hadith in the first chapter of this book, Sharful Mustafa, is this hadith. And so I was able to read through the entire hadith from the original source of Imam An-Nishapuri. He was a great Imam of hadith. You'll find it often quoted in the works of all the great Aimma, Imam Abu Sa'd al-Nishapuri. And so he narrates this hadith which is regarding King Tubba al-Awwal. And I just want to briefly mention that narration to you and narrate to you in particular the ending of that narration from the actual source and the text. It's mentioned in Sharf al-Mustafa. And just the name of that chapter is quite interesting when you actually open the book and you open to the first chapter of this book. Imam An-Nishapuri, he entitles this chapter, that this chapter is regarding that person who accepted Islam upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He believed in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam basically 1,000 years before the arrival of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the title that he gives to his chapter. And so Tubba al-Awwal, he was a king who lived 1,000 years before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was one of those kings who had a great deal of, his kingship sort of spans a very large area, and some narrate that it was the most of the known world at the time. And the way he did this was that he conquered every land that he went into. He had a huge army, and he would take some of their greatest minds. He took, so the chapter is Babun fi shani man amana bi Rasulillahi sallallahu alaihi wasallam qabla bi'satihi bi alfi sana. This is about a person who accepted belief in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1,000 years before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's bi'tha and before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was actually born. And this is narrated by Imam Muhammad bin Ishaq. And he says that Tubba al-Awwal, eventually he came to Makkah al-Mukarramah, and his intention was to demolish the Kaaba. وَكَانَ مِنَ الْخَمْسَةِ الَّذِينَ كَانَتْ لَهُمُ الدُّنْيَا بِأَسْرِهَا. He actually mentioned, he says he's one of those 5 kings who had the entire world under his rulership and under his kingship. And so he says that he came to Makkah, and what he did was he went to one city and he conquered that city, and he took 100 of their greatest, or 10 of their greatest scholars, and he made them travel with him. By the time he arrived in Makkah, he had a group of 4,000 scholars traveling with him. And they were traveling from one city to another with him. And so it says that he came to Makkah. وَكَانَ مَعَهُ. And he says that when he came to Makkah, there were 4,000, as I mentioned, 4,000 ulama who were with him. And he'd taken them from different cities. But everywhere he went, because he went with a huge army, it's actually mentioned about his army that he had 133,000 cavalry. Cavalry means soldiers on horseback. He had 133,000 cavalry, and he had 113,000 foot soldiers. So in total, he had with him an army of about 250,000 people, soldiers. And so you can imagine that whenever he entered a city with an army that size, what the reaction would be from the people of that city. But the narration mentions that حَتَّى جَاءَ إِلَى Makkah, when he came to Makkah, and he had this army with him, and he had these 4,000 scholars with him as well, He came to the people of Makkah, but the people of Makkah, they didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't do anything at all. And he was offended by this. Naturally, he's everywhere he's gone, people have immediately sort of surrendered, and not just surrendered, they've pledged allegiance to him, or they've treated him like royalty as he was expecting. The people of Makkah, they don't bat an eyelid. And he's surprised by this, and he's offended by this. And he asks his wazir, he says, what's wrong with these people? Do they not see that I've got such a huge army with me? Why are they not actually, why is there no reaction? And so his wazir, he says to him, Ayyuhal Malik, he says, oh king, innahum qawmun arabiyyun jahilun. He said, they're just ignorant Arabs. La yarifuna shay'an, they don't know anything. And وَإِنَّ لَهُمْ بَيْتًا يُقَالُ لَهُ كَعْبَةً. They've got a house, as a structure that they refer to as the Kaaba. And they completely besotted with this building. وَيَسْجُدُونَ لِلطَّاغُوتِ وَالْأَصْنَامِ دُونَ اللَّهِ. And they worship idols, and they prostrate to them, besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which they've got in and around this Kaaba that they revere. So the king, he asked him, he said, they really think so much of this building, this Kaaba? And he said, yes. So he descends into the valley of Makkah, and with his whole army. وَتَفَكَّرَ فِي نَفْسِهِ دُونَ الْوَزِيرِ وَدُونَ النَّاسِ. Specifically mentioned that he thinks in his own heart, without actually saying anything to the wazir or anybody else. This is purely in his own heart. He makes the intention that he's going to demolish the Kaaba, right? Because he's taken offense to how they've behaved, and he's been told that this is something that they revere, so he decides he's going to demolish this Kaaba. And he's going to kill all their men, he's going to take their women and children as prisoner, and basically he's going to completely destroy them. When he makes this intention, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inflicts upon him a very debilitating illness. Immediately he becomes very, very severely ill, and such that it's indescribable. And it mentions that he's got sort of liquids coming out of his orifices and in his body, and such a putrid stench that no one can even stand next to him. Right? And in a matter of sort of moments, he goes from being completely healthy to being completely debilitated by this illness. And so he instructs for all the doctors and physicians, all the learned people that are traveling with him to be gathered. And so even those doctors and physicians, never mind treating him, they can't bear to be anywhere close to him simply because of the wretched and foul smell that's coming from his body. And so he asks, he says, is there no one who's able to cure me? And these physicians, they reply, they say, Inna qawmun amruna ad-dunya. They say, we are people whose our affair and our matter is that we deal with illnesses of this dunya. We deal with ailments that people befall, and they have reasons and causes in this dunya. وَهَذَا أَمْرٌ سَمَاوِي. But this does not look like a normal illness. This is something that's been inflicted upon you from the heavens. There's nothing that we can do about it. لَا نَسْتَطِيعُ. We are not able to do anything about this because it's not something from within this world. So his matter becomes progressively worse. He becomes more and more ill. And people sort of start leaving him. And every moment he's getting worse and worse until nightfall. And then one of these scholars, he comes to the wazir. And he says to him that, I want to say to you something in secret. in Khan al-Malik, he says, if this king, if he tells the truth to me, right, if I go and speak to him, and I ask him something and he answers me completely truthfully, I may be able to cure him. So obviously he goes back to, the wazir goes back to the king, takes hold of his hand, takes him to the king, and he says, this is one of the scholars that is traveling with you. And he is saying that if you answer him absolutely truthfully in whatever he asks you, he may be able to treat you. And so obviously the king, he's absolutely ecstatic over this. And so he gives permission for him to enter. And he enters and he says, look, I want you to tell me truthfully. And I want to speak to you in solitude. So he sends everyone away. And now it's just the king and this scholar, this alim. And he says to me, answer me truthfully. Tell me absolutely honestly. هل نويت في هذا البيت أمرا? He says, did you intend to do something to this house, the Kaaba, this structure? And he says, yeah. I intended to demolish it and to kill all the men that were living here. He says, your inna waj'aka wa bala'aka min hadha. He says, your illness and your suffering is because of this. It's for this reason. And he says that I know that anna sahiba hadha al-bayt qawiyyun. The master, the owner of this home, he is very strong. The strongest of all. And he knows ya'lamu al-asrar. He knows secrets. He knows what's hidden inside people's hearts. And he said to him, he says to him, expel whatever ill thoughts you have about this Kaaba and the people around it from your heart. And I will hope that you will attain the blessings of this world and the Akhirah. You will become well, and Allah will bless you in this world and the Akhirah. Rectify your intentions towards these people and towards the Kaaba. Qala al-Malik, the king, he says, I've done this. I've expelled any and all thoughts, evil thoughts that I had towards them from my heart. And I intend only good with these people. And it's narrated that before the scholar, the alim, left his tent, the king had recovered completely. He recovered completely. And وَعَافَهُ اللَّهُ جَلَّ جَلَالُهُ بِقُدْرَتِهِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted him health through his qudra and ability. فَآمَنَ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ سَعَدٍ. From that moment, he began to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He became a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He left his tent all healthy and sound, ala deen Ibrahim, on the religion of Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam. He went to the Kaaba and he had drapes made for the Kaaba. And in this narration it says, وَهُوَ أَوَّلُ مَنْ كَسَى الْبَيْتِ. He is the first person to have had drapes put over the Kaaba. So he's the first person who had a ghilaf or drapes put over the Kaaba. And so he then commanded some of his army to remain there and to provide protection for the Kaaba and for the people of Makkah. He himself, وَخَرَجَ هُوَ إِلَى يَثْرِبٍ. He himself went towards a land, an oasis, at that time which was known by the name Yathrib. And as I mentioned, just an oasis. No homes, nobody living there, just a stop, a rest stop, if you like, for travelers. And so they start heading in that direction. And it's mentioned that فيها عين من ماء ليس فيها بناء, and there wasn't a single home or structure, and there was nobody living there at all. So they descend around the spring of water that's there, he and his army. فجمع العلماء والحكماء الذين كانوا معه. These 4,000 scholars that were traveling with him, they come together when they land in Yathrib at that time. they descend there, or they disembark there, and these 4,000 scholars, they come together to have a meeting. And the leader, the senior most scholar amongst them, the one who had treated the king, the one who had actually gone in and spoken to the king, he discusses with the rest of them. And out of the 4,000, 400 of them, they decide that أنهم لا يخرجون من ذلك المقام. They're not going to leave from here. They want to stay there. And look at this. This is really, really interesting. وَإِنْ ضَرَبَهُمُ الْمَلِكُ, even if the king beats them, وَقَتَلَهُمْ, and he kills them, وَحَرَقَهُمْ, and even if he sets them alight, sets them on fire, they're not going from there. To be that inclined, that level of inclination really implies, or not even implies, it clearly tells us how certain they were of their knowledge and their assumption. So all of them then, they went to the king. And they said to him, إِنَّا خَرَجْنَا مِنْ بُلْدَانِنَا وَطُفْنَا مَا الْمَلِكِ زَمَانًا وَجِئْنَا هَذَا الْمَقَامِ. They said that we've been traveling with the king for all of this time. We left our homes, went to all of these different cities, and we've been traveling with him. We've done everything that he says. And now we've come to this place, but we're not going from here. We would rather die here than go with him. And even if he kills us and burns us, we're not going from here. So the king, he speaks to his wazir, and he says, his minister, he says, "Unzur ma shanu." He says, go and find out what's going on with them. They don't want to come with me. وَأَنَا أَحْتَاجُ إِلَيْهِمْ. And I need them. I need them to be with me. And وَأَيُّ حِكْمَةٍ فِي نُزُولِهِمْ فِي هَذَا الْمَقَامِ. And what's the reason? Why do they actually want to stay here? Go and find out. Why have they chosen this place? He's surprised. That why have they chosen this of all places where there's nobody living here, there's no homes, there's nothing. Why do they want to live here? Go and find out. And so the wazir, فَخَرَجَ الْوَزِيرُ وَجَمَعَهُمْ, he leaves and he gathers all of them. And he tells them what the king has said. And they say to him exactly what they've said to the king. And he says to them, فَمَا الْحِكْمَةُ فِي ذَلِكَ. He says, what's the reason? Tell me the logic. Tell me the reason why you want to stay here. And so they say, all of them, they respond to him and they say to him, اعلم أيها الوزير. Say, oh minister, you should know, أن شرف هذا البيت, the nobility of that home, or the house, the Kaaba, right, the honor of the Kaaba, and the nobility and honor of this city, بسبب شرف الرجل. This is purely down to one man. And he is one person who is yet to come into this world, يُقَالُ لَهُ Muhammad. He is someone who is to come into this world by the name of Muhammad. Imam al-Haqq. He is the Imam, the true Imam. And they describe the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Sahib al-Quran wal-Qibla, Sahib al-Liwa wal-Mimbar, Sahibu qawli la ilaha illallah, mawliduhu bi Makkah. That they say that he is, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is the one who will be given the Quran and the Qibla. He'll be given the standard and the flag on the Day of Judgment, Liwa al-Hamd, and the one who will possess the Mimbar. He is the one who will possess the statement, La ilaha illallah. He will be born in Makkah. He will migrate here. This is his place of migration. فَطُوبَى لِمَنْ أَدْرَكَهُ. So glad tidings to whoever finds him, whoever meets him. And they said, وَكُنَّا عَلَى رَجَاءٍ. We are hopeful that we will get to meet him. And if we don't, then if we stay here, one of our children or our descendants will have the honor of meeting him. When the wazir, he heard this, he decided that he's going to stay with them. He's not going to go. And so, he doesn't tell the king anything. And in the morning, when the king gives the instruction and he says, let's go, let's move, the wazir, including the rest of them, they say, we're not going. And so the king then asks the wazir, he says, I thought I told you to go and check and find out why, and you didn't come back to me. The scholars, they say, we told your wazir. We told him, when he asked them directly, he says, why do you want to stay here? They tell him that we told your wazir. We told him last night why we're not going from here. So he calls the wazir and says to him, why did you not tell me? I sent you to go and find out. You didn't tell me. And he said, I didn't tell you because I feared that if I told you, then you would make me go with you, and I don't want to go either. I want to stay as well. So the king, then when he hears this, he starts thinking, and he stays with them. And he says, okay, fine, I'll wait with you as well. And they wait for 1 year. Tubba al-Awwal stays there with his whole army for 1 year. But obviously the Prophet ﷺ does not arrive. And so after 1 year, the king, he instructs for 400 homes to be built. لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْ أُولَٰئِكَ الْعُلَمَاءِ دَارٌ. One home for each of those 400 scholars. And he has each of them married. And he gives each of them excessive amounts of wealth and money. He says, so that they don't come across any kind of difficulty. And وَأَمَرَهُمْ أَن يُقِيمُوا فِي ذَلِكَ الْمَوْضَعِ إِلَى وَقْتِ مُحَمَّدٍ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. He instructs them to stay there until the time of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. وَكَتَبَ كِتَابًا. And he writes a letter. وَخَتَمَهُ بِالذَّهَبِ. And he seals it with a golden seal. وَدَفْعَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَى الْعَالِمِ الَّذِي نَصَحَهُ فِي شَأْنِ الْكَعْبَةِ. And he gives that letter to the scholar who had treated him in Mecca, who had told him about the Kaaba and who had helped him recover in Mecca. And he says to him that he should give this letter to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in adrakahu, if he meets the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa in lam yudrikhu dafa'ahu ila awladihi. Says if you don't meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then pass it on to your children and tell them the same thing. Right? Tell them وَيُوصِي لَهُمْ بِمِثْلِ ذَلِكَ, to give them the same instructions that they are to give it to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If they don't meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then they are to pass it on to their children. And this should be passed on from one generation to the next generation until حتى يخرج رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, until the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم emerges. وكان في الكتاب. What was written in the letter? What was written in the letter is something that I've prepared as a separate notes for this session, which I believe will be emailed to you upon request. And so if you leave your details, this can be emailed to you. And it's basically the Arabic text of the letter and the translation of the letter of Tubba al-Awwal. And it's rather beautiful. Some of you might possibly be able to read and interpret the Arabic, but this is such an amazing tribute to Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that just to have these words and to look at them and to read the translation, I think is an honor and privilege. In that letter he wrote, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma ba'd. Ya Muhammad sallallahu alayka. Says, O Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Inni amantu bika. Indeed, I have believed in you. Wa bi kitabika. And I have believed in your book. Alladhi anzalallahu alayka, that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed and will reveal upon you. وَأَنَا عَلَى دِينِكَ وَسُنَّتِكَ. And I am on your religion and following your sunnah, on your way, your path. وَآمَنْتُ بِرَبِّكَ. And he associates his belief. Right? This order and sequence is something for you to consider as well. He's writing to the Prophet ﷺ and expresses his belief in Rasulullah ﷺ first before expressing his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Signifying that the only way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through Rasulullah ﷺ. And so then he says, وَآمَنْتُ, and even when he expresses his belief in Allah, he doesn't say آمَنْتُ بِاللَّهِ, I believe in Allah. He says, آمَنْتُ بِرَبِّكَ. O Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I believe in your Lord. I believe in your God. وَآمَنْتُ بِرَبِّكَ وَرَبِّ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, and the Rabb, the Lord of everything. And وَبِكُلِّ مَا جَاءَ مِنْ رَبِّكَ مِنْ شَرَائِعِ الْإِيمَانِ وَالْإِسْلَامِ. And I express belief in everything that you have come with in terms of Sharia, legal rulings, belief and Islam, submission. وَأَنَا, he says, and I accept. وَأَنَا قَبِلْتُ ذَلِكَ. And he says, if I meet you, فَإِنْ أَدْرَكْتُكَ فَبِهَا. He says, if I meet you, then so it is. And what a fortune, what a blessing that would be. وَإِنْ لَمْ أَدْرَكَ. If I don't, وَإِنْ لَمْ أُدْرِكُكَ. If I don't meet you. If I don't have the fortune and the honor of meeting you. فَاشْفَعْ لِي يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Then intercede for me on the Day of Judgment. And don't, وَلَا تَنْسَنِي, and don't forget me. This is the intercession of Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That somebody living 1,000 years before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is born is writing to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and begging for his intercession. Right? That if I meet you, then what an honor this will be for me. وَإِن لَمْ أُدْرِكَ. If I don't meet you, فَاشْفَعْ لِي, then intercede for me يوم القيامة, on the Day of Judgment. क्या ही ज़ौक़ फ़िज़ा शफ़ाअत है तुम्हारी, वाह वाह। क्या ही ज़ौक़ फ़िज़ा शफ़ाअत है तुम्हारी, वाह वाह। कर्ज लेती है गुनाह, परहेज़गारी, वाह वाह। I apologize, we just looked at the time now. We seem to have gone over a little bit. So I'm going to finish off this letter. I had intended to recite a few verses for you today, but it's not to be. And he said, don't forget me. فَإِنِّي مِنْ أُمَّتِكَ الْأَوَّلِينَ. I am one of the first of your ummah. وَبَايَعْتُكَ قَبْلَ مَجِئِكَ. And I am pledging allegiance to you before your arrival. وَقَبْلَ إِرْسَالِ اللَّهِ إِيَّاكَ. And before Allah sends you. وَأَنَا عَلَى مِلَّتِكَ وَمِلَّةِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ. I am on your millah and nation and the nation of Ibrahim alayhi salam, your father, friend of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وَخَتَمَ الْكِتَابِ بِالذَّهَبِ. He sealed the book with a golden seal, and he had inscribed on that seal, لِلَّهِ الْأَمْرُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَمِنْ بَعْدُ وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. He had the inscription written that for Allah alone is the command, before and after, and the believers will rejoice on that day. And that's Surah number 30, verse number 4. And on the front of the letter, وَكَتَبَ عَلَى عُنْوَانِ الْكِتَابِ. At the front of the letter he had written, إِلَى مُحَمَّدِ ibn Abdullah, خَاتَمِ النَّبِيِّينَ وَرَسُولِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ. To Sayyidina Muhammad bin Abdullah, seal of prophets the messenger of the Lord of all the worlds, salutations upon him. Min Tubba al-Awwal, from Tubba al-Awwal. Amanatullahi fi yadi man waqa ilayhi. This is a trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hands of whoever it falls in. That an yusilahu ila sahibihi, that he should pass it on to its rightful owner. What happened? This, at the end of this narration, it mentions that this was exactly 1,000 years before the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was the first settlement of Medina. And these people, they continued to live there. They continued to remember the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and remind their children of these stories and these descriptions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, until when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually came to Medina Munawwara, this letter was then retrieved. And how did it actually how did it reach the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Who took it? What happened after that? There's just a very short passage left from this narration, which I'm going to leave till next time. Please stand for Salam. Mustafa Jane Rahmat Bela Ku Salam Sham'i Baz Mein Hidayat Bela Ku Salam. Jis suhani ghadi chamka tayyiba ka chand, us dil afroz saat pe lakho salam. Mustafa jane rahmat pe lakho salam. Sham'i baz mein hidayat pe lakho salam. Kash mahshar mein jab unki आमद हो, भेजे सब उनकी शौकत पे लाखों सलाम. मुझसे खिदमत के कुदसी कहे हाँ रज़ा, मुझसे खिदमत के कुदसी कहे हाँ रज़ा. मुस्तफा जाने रहमत पे लाखों सलाम. शम्ए बज़ में हिदायत पे लाखों सलाम. Inshallah, we'll be concluding that narration next week, and I hope to narrate to you next week a detailed narrative of specific events around the birth of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which I'm actually I'm thinking that many of you will perhaps not have come across such a detailed account and narrative before. Hopefully there will be something new for you. Very, very detailed, but specifically, and you know, as Rabiul Awwal approaches, the feelings of the heart are just they're changing, and you can sense that blossoming of Rabiul Awwal. You know, the spring, the first spring. You can sense it's coming. So inshallah, that will be next week. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammad wa barik sallim. Allahumma rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. صلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.